Hi again, this is Doug from the Phoenix, and it's a cold, rainy day in Washington State, and so I'm working on boat projects. And one of the projects we're doing this year is to install a water maker on our boat. And so I'm going to talk you through the water maker we have, the installation, and just show you how it went and how it works. Hope you enjoy. So the system that we purchased is the SeaWater Pro. This is a company out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Everyone we've talked to has had very good things to say, and this company's gotten really high reviews for their components. It's a modular system, which allows you to put it into different nooks and crannies in the boat if you need to. You don't have to set up a large area for a water maker. And so I'm going to walk you through. So our system is the 12 volt, 17 gallon per hour water maker system. They do come in AC variants and systems which 24 volt instead of 12 volt, and some of those systems have two membranes where ours only has one. But the system is very similar, and it's very modular. So I'll walk you through the different components and show you what I have after unpacking the box. And so the system's set up so that you'll get salt water out of the ocean or the sound through a through hole in your boat, and then you can run it through a strainer, which is not included in this particular package, or you can share an existing strainer with something on your boat. I plan to share the generator through hole and strainer for the water for the desalinization unit, and if that works out, I won't have to add another hole on the boat. So the salt water will come in through the strainer, and the first component that it reaches is the boost pump. This boost pump simply pressurizes the water up to 15 psi ideally, and runs it through a series of filters, a 20 micron filter and a 5 micron filter. Once the filters are in those are the cases. The salt water then goes to a high pressure pump, which is simply a motor with a high pressure pump that'll pressurize that water, their salt water in the system, up to 800 psi. That water then will be forced through this membrane, and that will filter out all of the impurities in the water, all of the salt in the water, and you'll just be left with clean, fresh water. So that's how the system works. The other components that are included in the box are you have components depending on your system on connecting up the filters and the hoses and mounting the membrane. You have the three filters that we're talking about, the two that I was talking about, 20 and the 5, and I'll talk about the carbon filter in a minute. And then you have filter wrenches, and then you have hoses, both high pressure and low pressure hoses for the system. The other thing, if you looked at the diagram, this diagram shows the gauges at and flow meters at various points of the system. I purchased a panel that consolidates all the gauges onto one panel that will be the only thing that's really visible, and I'll put that somewhere in the cockpit. So it has the low pressure gauge, the main pressure, and that's the one that'll go up to 800 psi ideally, the switches for the system, a flow meter to show you how much your water is going through the system, a way to adjust your main pressure, and then a gauge for total dissolved solids, which shows you that the water that's coming out on the other side is safe to drink below certain levels. So that's the system and how it works. The one thing I didn't mention, which I will, is there's also a backflush portion of the system where you would put in pressurized fresh water to the top of this gauge. This gauge would then send the fresh water through a carbon filter and then just into the system. And so it just uses the pressurized water from the system at various intervals, whatever you program into, to flush the salt water and the impurities out of the system. Just keep it clean while you're running it. There's a whole separate procedure for pickling and winterizing a system when you're not using it for a period of time, but that's not it. This is simply an ongoing flush sequence that happens while you're using your filter, using your system. So that's it. So I'm going to be going through the boat and looking for a location to put this. I want it in the stern of the boat so it's near the batteries, near the generator, through hole in the strainer, and then I'll need to look for a spot to mount the membrane, the motor, the filters, canisters, and then I'll also need to look at where do I want to tie this, the freshwater, to go into my freshwater tank. And I'll show you all that after I take a look and decide where it's going. Thanks. All right, so here I'm going to show you where I put the filters. This is our center hatch of our salon. It goes down in between the two engines. And aft of the starboard engine is our filters. Pretty easy access. Reduce that a little bit. Pretty easy access. Right now I'm doing a freshwater rinse with the timer. It's right over here. And here's the charcoal filter for the freshwater, and then the 20 micron and the 5 micron filter. Pretty easy access to change filters and good place to put it out of the way. I have my props and stuff back there, but I'll just remove the filters if I need to get to them. And yeah, good spot for them. So you can see back here, the wires, they go up to the control panel that's in the aft cockpit. To the right of the stairs, which you'll see in a minute. So rather than run the fresh water from the Watermaker all the way to the front of the boat and have to route it all the way through to get to the water tanks, I took the suggestion of some other installers and tied into the line, the water line, after the switch for the two tanks. There's a switch there that you can switch from tank 1 to tank 2, and before the pump. And so what this allows me to do is I can backfill water, fresh water from the Watermaker, and I can fill either tank just by flipping the tank switch. And the disadvantage of this is you need to break into the main water line. And so I was really careful to put a really nice fitting and valve on to make sure that I didn't disrupt the main water line. And then also from here, because at times you need to run water through the Watermaker and not have it go directly into tanks for a period of time, I've added a T and an extension hose so I can shut off the valve and not have it fill the tanks and just free flow this to a sink or overboard or whatever I want to do. So the control panel I put in the cockpit, just on the starboard side. Should be easy access to be able to run the controls. It's left loose right now because until I fire up the system, I want to make sure I have access to all the fittings. Underneath the cockpit, I've tied into the through hole for the generator, which is big enough holes to support both, and I'll only be running one at a time anyway. I did put in a separate shut-off valve and filter screen to screen for debris. You can see it down there. This whole area is my battery bank, and so all the loose wires, red and black wires there, are what was they'll be connected back to the battery bank as soon as I put it back in. So I got the water coming from the pump to the high pressure pump, and then you got a high pressure hose that runs it through the membrane, and then goes back to the control panel, and then the just for a gauge, and then the clean water, the water that goes to fill the tank, comes out of the center of the membrane, and then that feeds up to where into my T-fitting into my water line so that I can fill either tanks. Then the only other thing I have is back here. I did put in another through hole just for the drain. I was going to tee into an existing, but it was easier just to drill a separate one. And then this is what it looks like once the battery bank is put back in. All the components are kind of buried. The TDS count is about 106, 109, 111, and that'll judge whether it's safe to drink. Okay, here's our first taste test out of our Watermaker, drinking directly from the ocean, salt water.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Refreshing.
Tastes good.
Yep.
So that's our SeaWater Pro Watermaker installation. Just a few comments, impressions. The SeaWater Pro system is very modular, so it does allow you to fit the system in smaller spaces than a combined unit. You can separate it out and kind of stuff it in nooks and crannies. One thing that I experienced just calling in for support is they have very, very good customer support, customer service. You don't get a recorded number. You don't get a overseas answer center. The person that answers the phone is Mike, usually, who knows the system inside and out and can provide very good technical information if you're trying to put the system in. Their documentation is a little bit behind, and so it's getting better. But for example, the system that I received there was no potentiometer on the boost pump, and part of the instructions were how to tune the boost pump for specific pressure when the system's operating. And when I called in, I found out they actually changed the boost pump and there was no need for a potentiometer anymore. And then during that call, was informed to make sure that the membranes were conditioned before use, and that was not in any of the documentation that I had. And so the documentation is getting better, but the company's kind of still growing and hindered. The documentation's a little bit behind where the product is. And so just be aware of that. And then just another kind of personal peeve or preference of mine is the system uses RV boat plumbing connections. It relies on push-pull fittings and Teflon tape in the plumbing connections, and I'm just would prefer to see a more robust residential plumbing package included instead of that. But I think that's kind of typical of all Watermakers that are used on boats and RVs. Overall system seems very, very good value for the money. The components are good quality, or seem to be good quality, and like I said, the value, the price point that these Watermakers are seems to be pretty attractive. That completes this video. We will begin releasing videos of our trip to Alaska, and so if you're interested in that, stay tuned. And again, subscribe to the station if you want to be notified when new videos are posted. Thank you. Have a good day.